Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, November 16, 2021. House and Senate Democratic leaders giving a clearer picture of the timeline for debating and voting on the Social Spending and Climate Programs bill. President Joe Biden stands before a bridge in New Hampshire in desperate need of repair to promote the infrastructure spending bill he just signed into law. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas grilled by Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans about immigration and border security. Another long-serving Democrat announces her retirement, Congresswoman Jackie Speer. This follows yesterday's retirement announcement by Senator Patrick Leahy. We'll talk about the 2022 election outlook with a senior reporter at The Hill. A call from a top Senate Democrat to fire the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons after an investigation showed serious violations of conduct by correction officers, and support in Congress for protesters against the Cuban government. All ahead on Washington Today. This from the Washington Examiner. House Democratic leaders said lawmakers could vote on a $1.85 trillion social welfare spending bill as early as Thursday before a full cost analysis is completed. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer telling reporters the House will begin debating the Build Back Better plan on Wednesday, with a vote as early as Thursday and hopefully the latest on Friday or Saturday, he said. Announcement means that House Democrats may be forced to vote on the massive bill before the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office produces a final analysis of the cost of the bill, known as a score, which party centrists have insisted on seeing ahead of consideration. Hoyer telling reporters the vote would happen after the CBO provides enough information, as he put it, to get fiscal posture of the Build Back Better clearer, which does not necessarily mean a CBO score. And finally, this from the Washington Examiner article: Democrats hold a bare majority in the House and must pass the measure unilaterally thanks to unanimous GOP opposition to the bill. The measure cannot pass if Democrats lose more than 3 party votes. Well, today, after a House Democratic caucus meeting, leaders holding a news conference, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney from New York, chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, getting a question about the public view of this bill.
As you probably know, the polling shows that the infrastructure bill is very popular, but the Build Back Better Act is not particularly popular right now. What is wrong with the messaging around Build Back Better, and how are you going to change that message?
Well, I think the premise of the question is absolutely not supported by the research.
Well, the individual pieces are popular, but when people ask about this act, it is not popular.
Okay, well, we're going to stick together. We're going to get it done, and we're going to tell the people we did it. And I think what you just agreed is that the key parts of this measure, like the infrastructure package, are not just popular, they are wildly popular. We're talking about reducing prescription drug prices, particularly for seniors. That's very popular. We're talking about people paying $35 for insulin who might be paying $1,000 right now. Trust me, that's popular. We're talking about cheaper ways for seniors to stay at home with dignity as they grow older. We're talking about capping people's child care costs, which cripples the budgets of many working and middle-class families. We're talking about help raising children. These are all key parts. The climate change initiatives, electrifying the federal fleet, building hundreds of thousands of charging stations across the country, creating millions of jobs. All of these components of the legislation you're talking about are deeply popular. So, look, we've got to, some people want us to sell the drive. I want to sell the touchdown. And we are in the end zone on the infrastructure bill, and we are on the 1-yard line with Build Back Better. And when we describe these achievements to the American public, that will be a record of results that we will be proud to run on. And the American people already understand the importance of those issues in their lives. What's missing is to get it done and to tell them we did it.
Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, Democrat from New York, he chairs the party's campaign fundraising committee in the House. A news conference today on Capitol Hill. More on the social spending bill, the White House dismissing a New York Times report from Monday that said White House officials have, quote, begun bracing lawmakers for a disappointing estimate from the Budget Office, which is likely to find that the cost of the overall package will not be fully paid for with new tax revenue over the coming decade. The White House Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates speaking with reporters about this while flying on Air Force One.
We're expecting the CBO score on tax revenue at some point in the next couple of days. And that seems to be an area where the administration is already anticipating that it may not be as favorable a number as you all have projected. How are you planning to deal with some of the moderate Democrats who are waiting for the CAPO score? Do you think that they will be persuaded that they should ignore what the CBO is saying when that was the holdup for them to even vote to begin with a couple weeks back? And then secondarily, are you confident that you actually have 50 senators on board for this, or will have them, that you really will have Manchin and Sinema, and that nobody else has any concerns?
So on your second question first, like the president said when we released the framework, we are confident that we are going to obtain 50 votes in the Senate for the Build Back Better Act. But I'm not going to speak to any specific kinds of interactions we've had with members on that. And then on your first one, I appreciate you raising that because there was a flawed report about this yesterday. As reporters who've been closely tracking the negotiations for months pointed out last night, after some of that flawed reporting, there has been wide agreement on the part of everyone involved, moderates, liberals, etc., that CBO does not have experience analyzing revenue amounts gained from cracking down on wealthy tax cheats who are taking advantage of every honest taxpayer. Last night, reporters directly asked key Democratic House members whose views run the gamut, including moderates, liberals, folks in between. They universally said this was not an issue at all. What's more, there's a huge body of work from economic experts, including Republican former Treasury secretaries, IRS commissioners who have served under presidents of both parties, as well as Larry Summers, with whom we have sometimes had important differences, affirming that if anything, our estimates lowball how much revenue can be brought in by cracking down on rich tax cheats. Also, CBO's fiscal data so far lines up with our estimates that we released to all of you for costs, or they even come in below our estimates. What's more, Moody's has verified this is going to be paid for, and this will reduce the deficit, is the bottom line for us, but there is no issue of that sort. This is something that has been known for months, and everybody is on the same page.
The White House Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates with reporters and the president on Air Force One today. If the House passes the social spending bill this week or this weekend, and you can follow the process gavel to gavel on the C-SPAN networks, and the bill does head to the Senate, and you heard reference to Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, one of the few centrist Democrats who've been driving negotiations, since their votes will be necessary to pass anything, assuming Republicans vote no. Senator Manchin telling reporters today that he's hearing complaints from his constituents about high inflation, and as for the White House claim that the social spending bill will lower inflation, he says, quote, I really haven't heard any specifics on that one. They say it's going to lower inflation. I'll have to check on that one. That was speaking with reporters. He expressed similar concerns when he chaired today a Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee hearing about energy prices.
The topic of this hearing is very timely with the rising energy prices, really the rising on all commodities in the American market, if you will. We're seeing right now across the country and around the globe. Prices are rapidly rising across gasoline, diesel, heating oil, natural gas, electricity, and even coal, and everything else in between, whether it be food and appliances and cars and everything else that we're seeing, and clothing. We're not on those subjects, so we're not in charge of that. This is in the stark contrast to the prices that bottomed out during the pandemic as economies around the globe slowed. But now, as our economies are rebounding, we're seeing soaring gasoline prices, and heating bills are expected to go up to 10, 20, and 30, or even 40% in the coming months, according to the Energy Information Administration's winter outlook. This is impacting all of our constituents. In fact, the Consumer Price Index for energy has increased by 30% over the last 12 months. Affordable, reliable, and dependable energy is part of what made us a superpower, and it's critical that we maintain that and keep these prices under control. Internationally, the worst crunch is in Europe and Asia. This fall, we've seen the demand for natural gas, coal, and crude oil surge across global markets, leading to higher electricity prices in Europe and Asia. This has led to curbs on electricity use in China, protests in Spain, and bankruptcies of some small power companies and shuttering of power-intensive factories in the UK. In China, it's been recently reported that coal production was rapidly expanded in an attempt to meet electricity needs, with a new slogan of "Guarantee the Supply." The energy supply crunch and high prices are of concern since global economies are increasingly dependent on our U.S. supplies, primarily natural gas, and we're not as insulated from global prices as we once were. We've seen our natural gas prices increase to over $5 per million BTU, their highest level in 7 years. That's a fraction of what they're paying in Europe, but it's still a big increase for us in the U.S. I understand that there are a number of factors contributing to the situation, but a primary cause in the demand is generated from a rapidly recovering economy is outpacing primary energy production, especially with respect to natural gas. I hope we will have ample discussion on how long can we expect this imbalance to last and what policies are key to ensuring that we do not see energy prices as high as Europe and Asia.
Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, opening up today's hearing. The committee's ranking Republican is John Barrasso of Wyoming. He also expressed concerns about high inflation, specifically on energy prices, but he tied it directly to the Democrats' social spending bill that the House plans to vote on this week.
President Biden and the House Democrats threaten to make inflation even worse. President Biden and House Democrats want to ram through partisan legislation that is estimated to cost over $4 trillion. It's almost as much in today's dollars as the U.S. spent in World War II. And it is the exact opposite of what Congress should be doing to fight inflation. To make matters worse, the House Democrats' bill will increase energy prices. It will impose a natural gas tax on American families. Almost half of all American households heat their homes with natural gas. And at a time of skyrocketing energy prices, House Democrats want to make it even more expensive for families to heat their homes. It's outrageous. The House Democrats' bill will also effectively end new oil, natural gas, and coal production on federal lands and waters. This bill surrenders American hard-won energy independence, and it makes our country dependent on the OPEC cartel and Russia. And mark my words, Mr. Chairman, this winter we will see photos of Russian oil tankers in the Boston harbor delivering to the United States, and the people of America will pay dearly for the energy that we're not producing in the United States. Because what Joe Biden did in Glasgow was beg OPEC Plus, which is plus Russia, to sell more energy and produce more oil for the United States to buy.
Republican Senator John Barrasso at today's Energy and Natural Resources Committee hearing focusing on energy prices. You can find the full hearing archived at our website, cspan.org. The social spending bill also has climate programs in it that the Democrats plan to pass. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he does not plan to bring up the bill that the House passes and do their work on it, assuming the House passes it this week, until after the Thanksgiving recess. That'd be the week of November 29th. He was asked today when the Senate might finish its work.
When do you expect this privilege scrub and bird bath to be complete, and when the Build Back Better bill, if it comes over from the House, how soon can you take it out?
Right. We're already working on the privilege scrub. That we can do. We don't have to wait for the House. We don't have to wait for a CBO score because the language is in it. And as everyone knows, the privilege scrub is a little different than the bird bath. It's just seeing if any portions of the bill cause the bill to lose its privilege, which means you lose all the rules of reconciliation. We're making good progress on that with the parliamentarian, the privilege scrub, and we hope we can get that done as early as this week. But then, of course, the House has to pass the bill. They haven't done that yet. That's what's delayed our plans. And you go through the bird bath, which is, and Republicans can choose to bird bath a whole lot of provisions. Now, if they try to be dilatory, the parliamentarian can cut them off. But that's going to take a little while, too. And then we will move to get the bill done. We aim to pass, the BBB is very important to America. We believe it's very popular with Americans. We aim to pass it before Christmas.
As the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, with reporters today on Capitol Hill. A lot of procedure there, talking about the budget reconciliation process. The bottom line on that is the Senate can pass something with a simple majority, and that would be all 50 Democratic caucus senators voting yes, assuming all the 50 Republican conference senators vote no, and then Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie, and it would pass 51-50. Assuming all those procedural requirements are met. Well, as for finishing it up by Christmas, at least one other Democratic senator, Jon Tester of Montana, thinks Senator Schumer's timeline is a little optimistic.
That's just what you're expecting for the end of your schedule. When do you guys do BBB? When do you get out of here for the year?
For the year?
Yeah. Christmas.
New Year's Eve? Yeah, do you have plans for Christmas? You can spend it at my house, because my plans are screwed up too. Okay?
So do you think it's going to be something that you think it's possible?
I think that it's going to be, I think it's going to be very late into December by the time we get everything done. If we get done so I have time to fly home before going to Indiana to see my kids, I'll be surprised.
That's Senator Jon Tester with reporters on Capitol Hill Monday night, that courtesy of Politico. Associated Press reporting President Joe Biden heading to New Hampshire on Tuesday afternoon to tout the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill he signed into law on Monday. The infrastructure package includes more than $500 billion in new spending for roads, bridges, rail, airports, water, and broadband. Biden speaking Tuesday at the Pemigewasset River Bridge in Woodstock, which has been red-listed and in need of major repairs since 2013.
My message to the people of New Hampshire is simple. It's this. Because of this delegation, New Hampshire and America are moving again. Your life is going to change for the better, and that's literal. For example, the Pemmy Bridge here, I just walked across, opened in 1939, 82 years ago. This may not seem like a big bridge, but it saves lives and solves problems. Let me tell you why. Businesses depend on it, like the local propane company or the sand and gravel company or the logging trucks. Or the public services depend on it, school buses, wastewater trucks, cross it every day. It's essential to Woodstock Fire Station, about a quarter mile away. Without this bridge, as I said earlier, it's a 10-mile detour just to get to the other side. And I haven't had a house burned down with my wife in it. She got out safely, God willing. But having a significant portion of it burned, I can tell 10 minutes makes a hell of a difference. It makes a big difference. Folks, every mile counts. Every minute counts in an emergency. And folks, this is a bridge that has been structurally deficient for years. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. But the fact is, it used to be able to carry 40-ton trucks. Now the bridge is down to 20-ton restrictions. In a couple of weeks, it's going to be closed to put steel plates down over the weekend for sections of this deck. That steel plate is basically like putting a Band-Aid on a major wound. This is going to make it bumpy for drivers, difficult for snow plows, and it's still dangerous for bikers. And when that's done, the bridge may need even more weight restrictions.
President Biden in Woodstock, New Hampshire. The White House putting out a list of some of the money that New Hampshire will be getting under the infrastructure spending bill, including $1.1 billion for federal aid highways, $225 million for bridges, $400 million for water infrastructure, $125 million improving public transportation options, and $100 million to expand broadband. And on Wednesday, the president will be in Detroit, also talking about the infrastructure bill. One other note about the president, this from Fox Business. He said he plans to announce a nominee for Federal Reserve Chair in about 4 days. Jerome Powell is the current chair, and the president could renominate him when his term expires early next year. But Fox Business also says Lael Brainerd, the sole Democrat sitting on the Fed Board of Governors, has also emerged as a potential contender for the job. On Wall Street today, the Dow was up 54, NASDAQ up 120, S&P up 18. Commerce Department says Americans increased their spending in October. Retail sales up a seasonally adjusted 1.7%, largest gain since March. But Associated Press in their story notes that much of the sales increase also reflected higher prices. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, writes Fox News, told the Senate Judiciary Committee Tuesday that the American immigration system is broken, while stating that not all of the 1.2 million illegal immigrants with final removal orders should be deported. It was Immigration and Border Security dominating today's hearing. Here's part of it. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, with the secretary.
Of the 1.7 million people who've come here illegally, how many of them have been released into the country?
Senator, I can break that down to the best of my ability. nearly 1 million, approximately, I would say 965,000, have been subject to expulsion under Title 42 of the United States Code.
Okay, that gives us how many left?
I believe approximately 40,000 have been removed under our immigration authorities that we in the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, slow down. Where that gets us to, like 840,000 people?
No. Approximately 965,000 were expelled.
Okay.
Approximately 40,000 have been removed. Approximately 125,000 unaccompanied children have been transferred to the custody and the shelter of Health and Human Services. The balance are, to the best of my knowledge, in immigration enforcement proceedings. Where
So what does that leave us? How many people are still here? Of the 1.7 million, how many people are still here?
I would estimate approximately 375,000 are
Still here.
Yes.
Okay.
Senator. That is my best estimate.
Do you believe that if you have an immigration hearing and there's a final order of deportation, that person should be removed?
I do.
Okay. Why is 1 million people still here after they get a final order of deportation?
Senator Graham, as I responded to...
Well, is the system working?
Oh, the immigration system is broken, has been broken.
Well, let me just say this. It's really broken if 1 million people have been ordered to leave and they haven't left. Do you believe that the Remain in Mexico policy instituted by the Trump administration is cruel?
As it was implemented, I do.
Do you support permanently doing away with the Remain in Mexico policy?
I do.
Do you think that will increase illegal immigration if we do?
I do not, because of the other efforts that we have underway.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas questioned by Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, at today's Judiciary Committee hearing on the Department of Homeland Security oversight. Full video runs about 3.5 hours, available at cspan.org. Reuters reports that Secretary Mayorkas at another event today hosted by a travel industry group said the U.S. is considering adding 4 countries to its visa waiver program that allows citizens to come to the U.S. without a visa for a stay of up to 90 days. Those 4 are Israel, Cyprus, Bulgaria, and Romania. With the U.S. Senate not able to debate the social spending and climate change bill this week since it hasn't passed the House, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants to begin debate on another large bill. It's the annual National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, authorizing $768 billion in the next fiscal year for Pentagon programs. NDAA has been a bill that has been signed into law for about 60 straight years, so it often becomes a useful and attractive vehicle for unrelated bills. Senator Schumer has one such bill in mind. He talked about it today on the Senate floor.
Last night, I took the first procedural step for the Senate to begin consideration of our annual national defense bill. Republicans have repeatedly said this legislation is urgent and needs to be taken up immediately. We've heard them say that. They've signed letters about it. With their cooperation, the Senate can start voting as early as today. We're ready to do that, and I hope Republicans can join in moving this legislation forward quickly. This year, it's my hope and intention to add to the NDAA the bipartisan legislation the Senate passed earlier this year to boost American manufacturing, scientific research, and innovation, and U.S. competitiveness. The U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, USICA, formerly known as the Endless Frontier Act, which I championed with Senator Young, with great help from so many, among them Senator Cantwell. It would be one of the largest federal investments in science, technology, and manufacturing for decades. It's an urgent and necessary step that will put more Americans to work in every corner of the country. It'll fight inflation and relieve overburdened supply chains. Talking about supply chains? Pass USICA. Nothing will do more over the next few years to reduce supply chain problems than this bill. and especially in the semiconductor industry. The chip shortage is not some abstract issue. It's impacting the daily lives of Americans. Cars, refrigerators, and other household appliances require chips. Supply shortages means Americans are left waiting a long time for these essentials. We have legislation ready to go to fix this major chip crisis. Addressing this crisis cannot wait.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. Watch the Senate live gavel to gavel on C-SPAN 2 television and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. And Washington Today continues in a minute.
Well, learn about the latest nonfiction books and best-selling authors on C-SPAN's newest podcast about books. In each episode, we'll report on bestsellers. We'll look at book reviews from around the country. You'll hear from authors talking about their latest books. You'll also hear insider interviews with nonfiction book publishing industry experts. On this week's episode, you'll get the chance to meet the owner of Source Booksellers in Detroit, Janet Webster Jones. She provides insight about selling books during the COVID pandemic and what it's been like for independent booksellers over the last 18 months. Find and follow About Books wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Senior reporter with The Hill, Alex Bolton, begins his article, Democrats are growing gloomier in their outlook for the midterms next year amid President Biden's poor approval ratings, nagging economic issues, and GOP advantages in the redistricting process. We'll talk with Alex Bolton in a couple of minutes about this. First, another House Democrat announcing she's not going to run again in 2022. Jackie Speer of California.
43 years ago this week, I was lying on an airstrip in the jungles of Guyana with 5 bullet holes in my body. I vowed that if I survived, I would dedicate my life to public service. I lived and I served. It's been a remarkable journey that has surpassed my wildest dreams. Today, I'm announcing that I will not be a candidate for re-election to Congress in 2022. It's time for me to come home. Time for me to be more than a weekend wife, mother, and friend. It's been an extraordinary privilege and honor to represent the people of San Mateo County and San Francisco at almost every level of government for nearly 4 decades. I have been deeply touched by your support during good times and bad. You've given me the latitude to fashion legislation that has truly changed the lives of thousands upon thousands of people.
Congresswoman Jackie Speer, part of a video that she posted today announcing her retirement. At a House Democratic Leadership News Conference, the caucus chair, Hakeem Jeffries of New York, asked about the growing number of members of his party in Congress not running again.
You know, you guys have seen a number of Dem retirements come up, and I expect more over the next year before the 2022 midterm. Do you think it's a messaging problem? Is that why you've laid out this plan? Do you think it's a messaging problem with selling these packages to the American people that might make 2022 more difficult?
Well, in terms of retirement, every individual that makes that personal decision to retire from the House Democratic Caucus, we are going to miss and miss their service. And certainly Representative Jackie Speer, an incredible, courageous, bold, fierce advocate for the American people, will be missed. But she's made that personal decision, and she served this Congress, this country, and her communities ably. This is a redistricting year. Sean and I came in a redistricting year in 2012. Pete was a member.
I tried, man.
He tried. But he's a red shirt freshman in terms of being a member of the class of 2012. He came in 2014. But it was 51 of us. 51 of us in 2012. And I believe, Sean will correct me, we picked up 15 or 16 seats that year. That means that the vast majority of the class of 2012 came in as a result of retirements, because that's what happens in a redistricting year. And so we're not even on pace to hit that number yet. We'll see what happens but this is to be expected, and I don't believe it has anything to do with our prospects in 2022. We're going to hold the House, and we're going to grow our majority, and we're going to do it because of extraordinary leadership. Speaker Pelosi, Sean Patrick Maloney, most importantly, because we're delivering for the American people.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic caucus chair at a news conference. With more on members' retirement and the 2022 elections, we're joined by the Hill's senior reporter Alex Bolton. Alex, the headline at your article is Midterm Gloom Grows for Democrats. What are you hearing about the reasons for gloom?
Well, there are several reasons for the gloom. The biggest reason is President Biden's approval rating, which has fallen steadily since his January inauguration. And especially concerning for Democrats is that his numbers have really dropped among independent voters. And the catalyst for that drop was the very messy withdrawal of U.S. Forces from Afghanistan in August. And that seemed to kind of crystallize voter frustration with a variety of things, inflation, the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic is kind of hanging on, not going away. People are frustrated that their lives are not returning to normal as quickly as they anticipated. There was a lot more optimism earlier in the year. And these frustrations, which were, I think, catalyzed by the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan, crystallized then into the results we saw in the Virginia, New Jersey, and New York elections on November 2nd, when Republicans won some real head-snapping victories. The headline victory, of course, was Terry McAuliffe losing the Virginia gubernatorial race to Glenn Youngkin, the Republican. This is in a state that Joe Biden carried by 10 points in the 2020 election. But also in New Jersey, we saw that kind of an unknown Republican challenger came very close to toppling the Democratic incumbent governor. And in both states, we saw pretty big swings of voters away from Democrats to Republicans only in the span of a year. And so this is bringing up, I think, a real sense of deja vu going back to 2009, 2010, when Barack Obama won a big election in 2008, but then there were early warning signs when Republicans picked up the governor's mansions in New Jersey and Virginia in 2009 that year. And then, of course, in 2010, there was the Republican Revolution. House Republicans picked up 63 seats. Now Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, is predicting that Republicans will pick up 60 House seats in next year's election, and it seems like things are shaping up that way. And one of the things that's kind of, I think, setting off alarm bells this week is that Jackie Spear of California became the 9th House Democrat to announce that she will retire at the end of 2022. And so with the House Republicans need to net just 5 seats next year to recapture control of the House. So I think right now it's viewed as more than a 50-50 proposition that Republicans take over the House, and it's viewed as a 50-50 proposition that they pick up the Senate too. A number of Senate races that were considered lean Democrat are now being shifted to the toss-up category, and that is bad news for Democrats, good news for Republicans.
And you write that Senator Patrick Leahy's announcement yesterday that he is not seeking re-election, also setting off some alarm bells.
Well, Leahy had signaled to colleagues as recently as May that he fully intended to run for a 9th term, planned to run for re-election. And his announcement yesterday that he was going to, in fact, retire surprised some people. And it's being seen as just another sign that there is dimming optimism that Democrats will retain full control of Congress in 2023. And I think there's kind of a sense among Democratic senators that they are probably going to lose the House, and they're not looking forward to the legislative gridlock that is likely to ensue if Republicans control the House and Democrats control the Senate. But then beyond that, there's also a chance that Republicans pick up the Senate. And if that's the case, Patrick Leahy, who's the Senate President pro tem, would lose many of his perks. He would lose his security detail. He would lose his extra office space in the Capitol if he lost that Senate President pro tem's position. So I think the fact that he is stepping away after indicating earlier this year that he planned to run is an indication that sentiments are changing and Democrats are getting more pessimistic about the upcoming midterms.
We're talking with the reporter Alex Bolton with The Hill. In the House, what has been the impact of redistricting since this is a year that's happening?
Well, certainly, that is a factor, and it's another reason why I think Republicans are expected to make big gains in the House. And I just saw reported, just earlier today that redistricting in Ohio is going to swing the balance of Republican seats in Ohio, the bellwether state that it is, substantially in favor of Republicans, and it's kind of it is indicative of what's happening around the country, that Republicans, they control more state legislatures, and they're going to use that to their advantage to draw very favorable districts, and it's going to mean, it increases the odds of a Republican takeover of the House.
Alex Bolton, The Hill's senior reporter. Follow him at thehill.com and on Twitter at Alexander Bolton. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
Another story from The Hill today. The House will vote Wednesday on a resolution to censure Congressman Paul Gosar, Republican from Arizona, and kick him off the Oversight and Reform Committee for posting an anime video that depicted him violently attacking Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, and President Biden. The move, confirmed by a source familiar with the plan, would make Gosar just the 24th House member to be censured in the chamber's history and the first in more than a decade. The resolution would not take away his other assignment on the House Natural Resources Committee. From Associated Press, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee demanded Tuesday that Attorney General Merrick Garland immediately fire the director of the beleaguered Federal Bureau of Prisons after an Associated Press investigation detailed serious misconduct involving correctional officers. Senator Dick Durbin spoke on the Senate floor about this.
Early today, the Inspector General at the Department of Justice released a stunning report. It found that the Federal Bureau of Prisons had failed to negotiate with the prison guard union for more than 20 months. Think of that. The management of the Federal Bureau of Prisons failed to negotiate with the prison guard union for more than 20 months. This has led to a delay of more than 30 critical Bureau of Prison policies to help protect their staff and inmates. That report was published just days after an investigation by the Associated Press, which concluded that the Bureau is, quote, a hotbed of abuse, graft, and corruption, and has turned a blind eye to employees accused of misconduct. Both investigations confirm what we've known for a long time. The current director of the Bureau of Prisons, Michael Carvajal, should no longer lead the Bureau of Prisons. This morning, I publicly called on the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, to replace Mr. Carvajal with a reform-minded director who's not a product of that Bureau's bureaucracy. Since Director Carvajal was appointed by former Attorney General Bill Barr in February 2020, we have witnessed a series of cascading failures that have endangered the lives of BOP inmates as well as the correctional officers who work there. Director Carvajal has failed to resolve chronic staffing shortages at the Bureau. He has failed to contain outbreaks of COVID-19 within our prisons. The infection rate, COVID-19 infection rate in Bureau prisons, 6 times what it is in the rest of the population. He has failed to fully implement the reforms that the members of this Senate enacted, including an overwhelmingly bipartisan First Step Act, signed into law by President Trump.
Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, chair of the Judiciary Committee on the Senate floor. The sponsor of a House bill to study slave reparations, Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, releasing a study today from the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. She says it supports her effort. The congresswoman led a news conference on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol.
The data within this report links adversity and trauma to a whole host of medical health problems. Experiences of adversity increase risk for problems with obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and more. It makes it clear, the HARM report, what a name, that epigenetics and the concept of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance is a transmission of deleterious effects of ancestral traumas through chemical epigenetic modifications of the DNA and inherited across generations. Please read it before you misinterpret it. It is a thoughtful, detailed report. So simply it makes it clear that our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-great can be negatively impacted by the ancestral traumas, even when they have not been directly exposed to any adversity. What does it mean if someone was to tell you that 4,000 of your recent souls were hung from the 20th to the 21st to the 22nd century and the 19th century? And so it is important to know that this research is crucial and that it notes scientific basis. Let me just simply say that, again, my thanks to the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. This report provides us with a singular, significant, historical, scientific presentation of the extended devastation of the impacts of slavery on the descendants of enslaved Africans and all of America. The goal of these historical investigations is to bring Americans to a new reckoning of understanding each other's past and to be able to present to America through H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals, a non-threatening, effective, forceful manner in which we deal with each other's pain.
Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee leading a news conference outside the U.S. Capitol. That bill, H.R. 40, was reported out of the House Judiciary Committee earlier this year by a vote of 25 to 17. It currently has 195 House sponsors, all Democrats. CNN story from Havana, Cuba. Cuban activists said they were forcibly trapped inside their homes on Monday as the government clamped down on plans for opposition protests on the island. Another news conference outside the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. in support of these protesters. Congresswoman Maria Salazar is a Republican from Florida.
As I stand here today, the Cuban people are crying for freedom. Yesterday, as you know, the whole world watched as hundreds of Cuban dissidents were silenced by the regime. A few weeks ago, Cuba's brave freedom fighters planned to go back to the streets and shout libertad, or liberty, once again. They encountered threats, kidnappings, and abuse. And yesterday, when the time came, they were muzzled once again. Junior Garcia, for example, the brave leader of this movement, has been under siege in his own home for days. They have covered his windows with enormous flags to cloak him in darkness and force him back into submission. For 6 decades, 62 years, this murderous regime has put a stranglehold on the Cuban people, but now the Cubans are saying enough. That's why every opposition leader right now is under house arrest. And dozens of teenagers who dared on July 11th to demand liberty on the streets of Havana are condemned to rot in a Cuban prison just for screaming liberty. That's why the repressive apparatus shuts down internet access every time, so the world won't see what they're doing to their own people. For months, the Cuban people have done their part. Now we, the United States, we must do ours. This country is the shining light of democracy in a sea of darkness that engulfs the Cubans for 60 years. But when they took to the streets in July, as I said, the Biden administration was all talk and no action. As the Congresswoman of the city of Miami, as I said, the heart of the Cuban exile community, the city of Miami, I am asking the White House once again, one thing and only one thing. Turn on the internet. Put your money where your mouth is. The technology we know is out there. Do the due diligence. Let's send a clear message to the Cubans that they are not alone. And it's not only Cuba. It's Venezuela. It's Nicaragua. It's Afghanistan. We're sending the wrong message to dictators around the world that we, the United States, the beacon of hope, is missing in action.
Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar, news conference on Capitol Hill. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan putting out a statement that reads in part, the United States is committed to supporting the agency of the Cuban people as they seek to promote democratic change as an inclusive and broad-based social movement. We urge the Cuban regime to refrain from violence against peaceful protesters and to immediately release all those unjustly detained, and we call on the international community to voice their support for the Cuban people. U.S. journalist Danny Fenster back in the United States after 6 months in jail in military-ruled Myanmar. He was convicted late last week of spreading false or inflammatory information, contacting illegal organizations, violating visa regulations, and sentenced to 11 years in prison with hard labor. Fenster spoke at a news conference in New York, along with the former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, who coordinated his release.
Thank you to everybody that's sitting up here. I can only just sort of reiterate what everybody said. These, different organizations, I think you all share the same interests, but work within different constraints. So everything that everybody was able to do within their mandates, this time it worked. And I'm incredibly grateful to seeing Bill and his team there. It's out on the tarmac waiting for me. It's just the greatest feeling I can ever remember having. To my family, I was able to get little hints of what was going on occasionally throughout the experience. If I was outside of the prison in court, maybe some police aide that could speak a little bit of English would flash a picture on his phone of my entire family wearing T-shirts with my face on it on CNN, which was a pretty bizarre thing to see, sitting in a courtroom there. So I was aware, and I know my brother. I know what he's capable of and how he works. So I assumed, I did not know the extent of it, but I assumed something was going on out there. And that gratitude, I spent the last 15 hours on the flight just looking at the coverage across the country in these places that I've lived, and seeing people sort of remembering me and pulling together, and it's incredible. I just have so much gratitude right now for everything everyone's done. I think every action everyone's taken has helped a little bit. So I'm going to take time to celebrate and to spend time with my family, and then, continue concentrating on all the other, not just journalists and prisoners of conscience in Myanmar and everywhere else. For me, in Myanmar, just a lot of citizens, doctors, teachers that are in prison right now. And that's another point that everybody here is reiterating. This will be a short little celebration, but let's keep focused on what the actual story is here.
Danny Fenster in New York City. Associated Press noting that he is one of more than 100 journalists, media officials, or publishers who have been detained since the military ousted the elected government of Myanmar earlier this year. And overall, security forces in that country have killed more than 1,200 civilians and arrested more than 10,000 others. And AP citing the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Get more Washington news sent right to you by subscribing to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. Just go to c-span.org/connect to subscribe. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Wednesday morning, we'll discuss the latest on President Biden's Build Back Better agenda and upcoming fiscal deadlines with Texas Republican Congressman Michael Burgess and Nevada Democratic Congresswoman Dina Titus. And then Detroit's WWJ News Radio reporter Jeff Gilbert talks about President Biden's trip to Detroit and how electric vehicles are changing the auto industry. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Wednesday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.